Day, folks. Our topic is Homeless, Not Helpless by Moorel Bey. During the height of the Great Recession in 2009, and after being laid off from Walt Disney Pictures, Moorel and her family became homeless. She was 9 months pregnant. Moorel recounts her family's 6-month ordeal and how she was able to pull herself and her family out of the dismal situation, utilizing a matter-of-fact approach to their predicament. Moorel Bey's mission is to use her personal experience to inform, empower, and inspire others to reach their highest potential. She feels immense comfort in knowing that being frank and honest, her journey can prevent others from experiencing the same unnecessary pain and suffering she endured and come to enjoy personal success. Let's give it up for Moorel Bey.
Thank you, Lulu, and thank you, Mensa, for having me here tonight. This very rainy, unusual event in Southern California. So I'm here today to speak about my family's experience being homeless and the lessons I learned. But before I get to that, I just want to start with some overall information about homelessness in general. So if you could press that button for me. So when people think about homelessness, this is typically what they think about. But one more time with the button. This is what my family looked like when we were homeless. That's in 2009. It was 8 years ago. It's just a coincidence that my hair is exactly the same. I always have long hair. That was intentional. This was an accident today. This is my son. He's 14 in this picture, and that was my 2-month-old. So in LA County, families represent about 14% of the homeless population. And many people who are homeless are not visible on the streets. My family was never homeless on the street. In fact, we stayed at the Hilton at one point. I'll get to that later. If you could just do the slide for me.
You can say next.
Okay, next. So in LA County, I did that already, sorry. So this, in 2016, this was the statistics for the homelessness in LA County where we are today. So there were 46,000 homeless, almost 47,000 homeless people living in the streets or on the shelter. And homelessness is a technical term. Some agencies or governments don't count things like couch surfing. So a lot of times we'll see families that are living in the living room, like they go back home, they're not on the lease, and they're staying there, and if the landlord finds out, they'll be kicked out. But a lot of agencies don't count those people as homeless. The social services department, actually before I get to that, so here are some more statistics. This was taken from the LA Times website. If we could just do next. So this is LA County. In the middle is our downtown LA area. You see it's 4,700 homeless we have in downtown LA, which includes Skid Row. Burbank here on this side here, 170 homeless. And these would all be people on the street because as I found out, Burbank does not have a homeless shelter. And then North Hollywood, 570 homeless. This is where I actually live now. I've been back and forth between North Hollywood and Burbank. And these neighborhoods are right next door to each other. If you're not familiar with the area, you can move this map over here and it would fit in together. Okay, so the social services department, their definition of homelessness is physically lacks a fixed and regular nighttime residence, shares a residence with other family or friends on a temporary emergency alert on our phones about the weather. That's fine. Okay, so physically lacks a fixed and regular nighttime residence. Little delay.
Turn that off.
It doesn't matter if it's off. These things come through whether or not it's off. Okay. So shares a residence with other family or friends on a temporary basis, or resides in a temporary shelter, commercial establishment, or transitional housing, or receiving a notice to pay or quit. So that's the Social Services Department of LA County. All those people would be counted as homeless, which would include anybody who is couch surfing. So a little bit about myself. My name is Moorel Bey. I'm 37. I work for LA County. I'm not representing the county today. I have to make that very clear. I want to keep my job. I do not want to be homeless again. My education includes a background, a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's in humanities, and a master's in public administration. I have 2 children, as you saw in the picture earlier. The youngest is now 7. He's in 2nd grade. My oldest is 22. He is in junior college. We're trying to get him into Woodbury, right down the street, for a video game design. Originally, I'm from Philadelphia. I came to California in 2006 to work for Walt Disney Pictures. I won a screenwriting fellowship with them. After the fellowship ended in 2007, I was laid off. Next. If you remember back to 2007, 2008, 2009, it wasn't a good time for the country. Shortly after Obama was elected for president, we were let in on the fact that the country had in fact been in a recession for the previous year. As I mentioned earlier, I was laid off in 2007. By 2008, December, I was really struggling. I was 4 months pregnant. My oldest son was 13. My husband wasn't working. I was working part-time nights, processing checks, a job I had done all throughout high school and college and thought I would never do again, especially after getting my bachelor's degree, especially after winning this huge fellowship with Disney and moving out here. But there I was, it was a job. I did what I had to do. So I was earning between $200 and $300 a month from that job. I was also getting partial unemployment benefits. So the way that works is you're entitled to a weekly unemployment benefit amount based on the amount of money you earned. I was entitled to the full benefit amount, which was $450 a week. Because of the stimulus, I think I got additional $25, so I was entitled to $475 a week. But because I was working part-time, they would subtract what I earned from my job from that, let you keep $75, and I would keep what was left. So between my part-time job and unemployment, I was bringing home anywhere between $1,800 and $2,200 a month. My rent over here in Burbank was $1,300 a month. I was paying $800 a month in other bills, utilities, car insurance, credit cards. So if you do the math very quickly, you realize there's no money left. So what I would do after I paid my credit card, I would use the $100 here, the $75 here, the $50 here to buy food or whatever necessities we would need. But that didn't buy a whole lot. So what I did was we started going to the food bank over here in Burbank. And that was okay. We even got like fresh fruit and vegetables. But they would expire. They were close to expiration when they gave it to us, so they wouldn't last very long. So then I went to apply for food stamps. Based on my income, we qualified for $136 a month in food stamps. So I just want to take a minute here to talk about another stereotype about welfare. There's this idea out there that people on welfare are getting a whole lot of money. In order to qualify for welfare in the first place, you have to be very, very poor to qualify for it. Once you do qualify for it, you're not going to get a whole lot. And you also have to work. Welfare benefits are not free. You have to be working in order to qualify for welfare benefits. So based on a 2-person household and my income, they said we would get $136 a month. Now they did a 2-person household and they counted myself and my 13-year-old, not my husband, because of welfare reform. So welfare reform applied in this case because my husband was a convicted drug felon. When he was 17, he went to prison for selling drugs. And welfare reform said we're not going to give drug felons welfare benefits. The intent was to punish people like him indefinitely. In effect, it punished families, because now our family had to live off of all this. So, that's where we were with the food situation. What I found out when I looked into it was that actually welfare reform didn't apply to my husband because his conviction, thank God, happened right before welfare reform. So I filed an appeal. Took months for them to figure that out, but that's another story. So it was the food bank, what I could get with my credit cards, the $136 in food stamps, and then I also got WIC, which is for women, infant, and children. So I was getting cheese, eggs, tuna, milk once a month with my WIC, and I could also go to the food market. I got $25 a month to go to the farmer's market, sorry. While this was going on, I'm watching these debates in Washington about whether or not they should continue to give unemployment benefits to people like me. And the Republicans were against this because they felt like continuing unemployment would make people lazy, which was confusing to me. Because even though I was pregnant and tired and anemic, I was doing everything I could to get a job. And it was like they were unaware that the national unemployment rate and the local unemployment rate were both in double digits. But eventually the Republicans came around, unemployment got extended, and we were able to maintain this status quo of barely getting by. March 2009 rolls around, 7 months pregnant. I go to the mail to get my second unemployment check. Instead of the check, I get a notice that says that my benefits are expired. Which is confusing again, because how can they be expired? Republicans just came on board and said, we're gonna help you out. So when I called unemployment and finally got through, I don't know if you guys ever were on unemployment back there, but it was out of control, you couldn't get through. Took months to get benefits. Eventually they redid the system. But when I finally got through, what they told me was, even though I had thousands of dollars left on my claim, and I had thousands of dollars left on my claim because I was working part-time and not getting full benefits, there's only a certain period of time that you can claim this money. And the claim period for me to claim this money was done. It was no like, in 3 checks, you won't have any more money. It was like, I go to the mailbox, there's no more money. So I'm panicked. You know, our money is cut in half in an instant. I went to my job. I had been going to my job, trying to get full-time hours. I'm working for a major bank. They're cutting hours. It's not happening. April 2009, April 1st, 8 months pregnant. The first rolls around. We're $225 short on the rent. If we pay it by the 5th, we avoid the fee. I paid it by the 5th using the overdraft protection on my checking account, but I know this is not sustainable. So I dig in, I'm on the internet all day. We're going to find some kind of option. Rental assistance. There were programs, but there was no funding. This is the height of the Great Recession. Nobody has any money left. I tried to find affordable apartments. I went on Craigslist. This thing I found out when I came to California. I found a new apartment building that they were building. The rent was $983 a month. Me and my husband, we got in our car, we went right over there to put the application there. It was rejected because of his credit. The apartment we were living in Burbank was in my name. Everything was in my name because I was the one with the good credit. It took a long time to be able to find an apartment that would rent to a couple without running both people. So that was the situation we were in. But even if we would have passed the credit check, it was a background check. And if they would have gone back more than 7 years, we wouldn't have got the apartment. It was always hard for us to find some place to stay. Last resort was a shelter, which when I looked into it, I found out that wasn't a viable option either. Shelters were full. If you remember back to the news back then, shelters were full all over the country. Families were living in cars. If it wasn't full, it was a situation where you had to call every day to find out if they had a space for you. That wasn't gonna work. Or if they did have space, they wouldn't take you as a family unit. I would have to go somewhere, my son and my husband would have to go somewhere else. Or they wouldn't take us as a family because my son was now 14, and they wouldn't take boys over 13. A lot of shelters, they cut boys off at 13. They have to go to an adult shelter with men. Or you have to leave all day. You get to the shelter, you have to leave at 7 in the morning. You can't come back in until 5 or 6 at night. And I work nights, and I'm pregnant and about to have a baby soon. I didn't know how that was going to work out. Last thing is this thing called mandatory shelter fees. You're not paying to be in the shelter. You're putting money in an account, so when you're ready to leave, this money is available for you to move into somewhere else. I guess they're used to dealing with people who can't manage money, so that's the way they do that. So I had found this shelter in Glendale, and we could go as a family. I would be on the women's side, my son and husband would be on the men's side. But they rejected me because of the fees. Basically, they wanted me to turn over 100% of my income to them. So when I got paid, I was gonna have to give them the check, which would mean, how do I pay my bills? How do I pay my car insurance? How do I keep gas in the car? How do I buy diapers for the baby? How is this supposed to work? They said they could work with me, but overall, I just had too many bills. This is the Great Recession. You have a different type of homeless population, but the shelters and these programs hadn't caught on to that yet. I found out about a transitional housing program. I know this is going on, and it was a lot for me to deal with. I went down there. We would be able to stay together as a family in a one room, but they had a waiting list, which I filled out the paperwork and got on, and to this day, they have not called me back. So I go back to welfare. Is there anything you can do? Welfare said, you're living above your means. My rent was more than 80% of my income. And for them, affordable rent was at 80%. Do any of you know what is affordable percentage of housing costs?
It's supposed to be 25%.
Yes, between 25, 30, most people say 30%. Your housing costs shouldn't be more than 30%. But for low income, we know that they pay a lot more in housing costs, between 50, and so welfare said 80%. So at that percentage, they said we needed to find a apartment at $720. And if we found an apartment at $720, they would help us with some move-in fees and some things like that. And I was really trying to stay in Burbank because my son was in school, and I really wanted to keep him stabilized in his school. So at that point in time, that was my mindset. So of course I couldn't find anything for that amount. And even if I could have found something, what I found is that landlords do not rent to more than 2 people in a 1-bedroom. That's illegal. I found that out. But in general, they don't want to put more than 2 people in a 1-bedroom. You're supposed to build up to 4 people in a 1-bedroom. So the dilemma I was facing in April, after we had paid that rent and knowing that May was around the corner and couldn't afford it, the dilemma was to stay in this apartment that we couldn't afford and hated for many, many reasons. The most pressing of which was I had a neighbor who was a literal racist, an overt one. I haven't dealt with many of those, but she would call me and my son ape and gorilla and monkey, and she had this habit of banging on my bedroom wall. So my bedroom, I found out, faced her bathroom. So she had to, I thought my bedroom faced her bedroom, but it actually faced her bathroom. So she would go in there wait to hear us like turn on the TV or something, and she would bang on the wall. And so I hated being in this apartment, and I couldn't imagine bringing my newborn baby home to this place and having this woman bang on my wall and wake up my newborn baby. You know, if she would have done that. So I didn't want to stay there. So the options we had were to stay there, don't pay bills, pay the rent, get bad credit, stay there, pay the rent, pay the bills, don't pay the rent, wait to get evicted. And neither one was an option for me. But if we left, we were gonna have to make a decision soon, because I needed to give 30 days notice. And in 30 days, I was gonna be, we were pushing a timeline for when I was due. So I didn't wanna be in a position where I'm having to move right before or right after I have to give birth. But if we give notice, where are we gonna go? But I had watched this video called The Secret. Have any of you ever seen The Secret? Okay. The Secret kind of changed my life, and because I'm a psychology major, it shouldn't have been that big of a difference, but it was talking about how you think affects how you act, and how you need to focus on what you want, not what you don't want. And so what I wanted was to not have to have my baby at this apartment. And so I focused on what I wanted. And so in that mindset, and after a lot of deliberation, we gave notice on May 12th that we would be leaving in 30 days. And I'm still having faith that something's gonna come through in 30 days. May 2009. So actually you're pregnant for 10 months, not 9 months. So my last day of work before my pregnancy leave, in California we have something called pregnancy leave. So the beginning of your 9th month, you can leave work and you get paid from the state. So the last day of work before my pregnancy leave was Friday, May 8th. The next day I had an interview for a job with the city, a good job, and I had been looking forward to this interview, my whole pregnancy. But the night before, I watched a special, and they were talking about discrimination against mothers and pregnant people. So, I'm 9 months pregnant. I tried to figure out something that would wear that could, but it was, I'm short, it's round, there's no hiding it. So I go to this interview, and ultimately my pregnancy did not matter because they were on a hiring freeze due to the recession. I didn't have a lot of time to dwell on it. We had to leave that Tuesday. So I spent all this weekend, which was Mother's Day weekend, packing. And the irony of having to pack up my apartment on Mother's Day weekend was that not only that, but that we had a refrigerator full of food for the first time because my appeal that I had filed months back had finally gone through. So they gave me like $800 in food stamps. So we went out and got this food. We ended up giving some of it to the neighbors. So we had to leave that Tuesday. Monday night was the last night in the apartment, and that was the first time there was really a bit of fear. Really a bit of fear. And I remember me and my husband, we cried before we went to sleep that night. But again, it's not a lot of time. So when we got up in the morning, I remember I didn't brush my teeth, I didn't eat anything. We just got up and we started moving, started cleaning. We needed to leave the apartment spick and span because we needed all that money back for the security deposit. Sorry. So we cleaned all day. We finally finished around 11 p.m. Turned in the keys. All of our belongings were in a rental truck. Between our 2 cars, we had most of our clothes, a cooler with the food that we could fit in it, our microwave, and some other essentials. And we went to the Travel Lodge over there in Burbank. Oh, can I do a next? This is our homeless adventure in the map form. So Travelodge, number 2, up there at the top of the screen, Burbank. The next day, we put all our stuff in storage, and basically the adventure began. I went back to welfare because now that we were officially homeless, they could help us. So at that time, they were giving you $65 a day for a motel, for a total of 16 days. I don't know what they expected you to be able to do in 16 days, and I got the feeling that the lady who was helping me really didn't care. She didn't want to give me the money because she felt like it was a once-in-a-lifetime program, and she wanted to know, what are you going to do the next time you become homeless? Which again is confusing to me because I had told her I had never been in this situation before. I had gone through foster care. I've worked since I was 16. I have a bachelor's degree. This is before I had my master's, both of them. I'm not a person who becomes homeless on a regular basis. Like, I'm getting 12 weeks of paid maternity leave from my job. Do you get 12 weeks of paid maternity leave from your job? But this is what I was thinking in my head. This is not what I said to her. So eventually she agreed to go ahead and give me the $65 a night. And what I found after some looking was the Ramada Inn in Burbank. So Ramada is number 3 in Burbank, up there on the top. It was $67 a night plus tax, which 65 and 67 doesn't add up, so I ended up putting the difference on my credit card again. Credit cards a necessary evil, but thank God I had them, because I don't know what I would have done without them. The motel vouchers would run out on May 30th, and I was due on June 9th. And I had to face the reality that we weren't going to find a place in 16 days. Closer to the end of the 16 days, I got a call from the landlord who had, thank God, processed my security deposit and gave it back to me quickly, which was about $1,000. So I went on a price line, and I set my own price at $45 a night for 3 weeks, which would include me giving birth to my son. And amazingly, it got accepted at the Hilton in Glendale, which sounds like, oh, great. But when I got there, it was $15 a day for a refrigerator, $10 a day for parking. Actually, it was $20 a day, and we talked them down to $10 a day. $10 a day per car for parking, $13 a day for the internet, and $10 or $11 a day for the microwave, which we had our own microwave, so we didn't have to use theirs. And the internet, I started to have to go to the library in Glendale to do my research, so we didn't pay for that either. But, you know, all these things were free at the Ramada and the Quality Inn, but now suddenly I have to pay for all these things. So it was a very nice place to stay for a little while, the environment, at least. So soon after checking into the Hilton, I gave birth to my son on June 3rd, almost a full week early. We stayed at the Hilton for 3 weeks. And it was getting closer and closer to the time we have to check out. And now I don't know what we're going to do. I don't have any more options here. So when I had gone over to the food bank in Burbank to pick up my monthly food, I talked to someone and they said, we can give you some more vouchers, but now you're going to have to come back to Burbank. So when our time was up, we packed up, went back to Burbank, and this time we were at the Quality Inn in Burbank, which is right across from the Ramada Inn, number 4. By the end of June, we had been in 3 motels in the Hilton, and we weren't any closer to finding anything permanent. For the rest of the summer, we moved from one motel to the other. We would literally get to the end of the stay and not know where we were going to go, but something would always come through. My grandmother had passed earlier, and I felt like she was, my grandmother passed maybe 5 months before I had my son. And I remember before we started out, I asked her to look over me. And it felt like when it came down to the last day and somebody else was going to move us to another space, that she was the one looking out for me. So by September of 2009, we were taking part in this 180-day shelter program. They don't have this program around anymore. But back then they had this 180-day emergency shelter program. But this particular program would never put us in a shelter. Their purpose was to put you into an apartment because they felt like that was a better way to transition you to living on your own. But they didn't have an apartment when we first stayed with them, so we were in a shelter in South LA for about 2 months. So for a month, we were in this motel in South LA. They found us an apartment in Koreatown, number 8. Koreatown is over here, down by the bottom. Remember, I started up there in Burbank and Green, and now I'm down here. So we get there, and there were roaches everywhere. Roaches everywhere. Everywhere. Everything you opened, everything you touched, everything you moved. We called them and told them we would rather stay in the car. So the next day they put us back in the motel in South LA. Now I just say motel in South LA without the name because this motel had prostitution and free porn in the room. But I mean, it was me, my family, it was other families there. We weren't concerned about that. You know, we're happy to have a place to stay. Take us back to the prostitution and free porn, which I had them block. By the end of September, they had finally got us into another place. This was in Boyle Heights, number 10, over there by the 10, Boyle Heights. And it was relatively nice. It was a large 1-bedroom. We had a huge kitchen, nice sized bathroom. The only thing was the floor wasn't level, so I would like put some sheets down and my baby down for tummy time, and he would kind of roll. So I had to like make a pillow border so he wouldn't go too far. But it was nice. It was nice. We had 2 months left at this point until November 13th. And I'm still doing everything I can to try and get out of this situation. I'm applying for jobs, city tests. There was a reality show that was going to help people in need. I went down there waiting in line with my baby. Second chance lottery, I don't know if it started back then, but I became aware of it back then. So whenever I go to the store, if there's scratchers on the ground, I'm grabbing them. Affordable apartments. I was told about 2 programs. One would only take me and my children. The other wouldn't take us as a family because of my husband's background. At that point, I wasn't ready to separate. We eventually divorced, but at that point, I wasn't there yet, so that wasn't an option. Around the end of September, I returned to work at the bank. My 12 weeks of maternity leave were up. My husband started participating in this welfare to work program called GAIN. October passed, and it was November 1st. We had 12 days left. On November 2nd, thanks to Obama's stimulus package, and I remember when he got elected and shortly afterwards, he made this speech about stimulus jobs. And I remember saying, God, I hope I can get one of those stimulus jobs. And my husband, he got a stimulus job through the Welfare to Work program. It was full-time, it paid $10 an hour. And ironically, he was working at a homeless shelter. And I told him, I said, if we can't find anything in the next week to 10 days, we're going to be coming to work with you and staying at this shelter. And he told me that it was a conflict of interest, that we wouldn't be able to stay there. So I went back to Craigslist like I always did, and couldn't find anything in Burbank, even with him working now. $10 an hour is not a lot. So I found this apartment on Craigslist in North Hollywood, $995 a month, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a balcony, a pool. It came with a refrigerator. I remember like it was too good to be true because it was $995 a month, and that was so cheap. And I said something must be wrong with it, but I didn't. This is North Hollywood. We're staying in Boyle Heights. I don't have time to like run up there and check out the apartment. I just emailed them, and I explained my situation. I said, we're homeless. My husband, he has bad credit. He just started working. I'm working. Can you help us? And she said, yes. And she said what clinched it was the fact that even with everything that had gone on, I had not gotten evicted from my last apartment, and I had managed to maintain my credit. So again, in this situation, they rented to us based on my credit, and they didn't do, well, they did a criminal background, but there's a 7-year and then there's the everything, and they did the 7-year, and my husband doesn't come up in a 7-year. So we moved in on Friday, November 13th, 2009. It was the first apartment that we had in California that actually felt like home. Can you press that? 1, 2, 3, 4. One more. Yeah. So if you look here, from the night we left, midnight Wednesday, May 13th, to the day we moved back in our apartment, 8 o'clock p.m., Friday, November 13th, it was exactly 6 months to the day. We were down to the wire. Somebody was looking out for me and my family, and we made it. People who know about what I went through always ask how I did it. It's just unimaginable to them because it seems like the worst thing in the world is to have to be pregnant and homeless. At 9 months pregnant, a woman should be nesting, preparing her home to bring home her baby, not packing up to become homeless. And all I can say is that I couldn't afford to dwell in the unfairness of the situation. I couldn't even afford to acknowledge that the situation was unfair. Next. I had read this book called The New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, which maybe you figured out by now, but I watch Oprah. So Oprah had referred us to this book, and they had actually done this 13-week course that I had done online, and this all happened before the homelessness came about. And basically the largest lesson I got from Eckhart Tolle is that you don't have to cause yourself additional suffering by resisting what is. For example, it's pouring rain right now. Your car breaks down on the side of the road, you got a flat tire. You can kick and curse and cuss, but that doesn't change the fact that you have this flat tire. You need to call AAA, call somebody. You have to do something. So in my situation, resisting what is was the fact that we didn't have enough money to pay our rent. That was the fact of it. And I had to figure out really quickly how to deal with it. I did resist that for a while, but then once I gave that notice that we were going to leave, I actually felt relieved. I didn't have to figure out how to hold on to this thing that I couldn't afford and didn't really want anymore. Next slide. This is, I have a website and I just grabbed this from the website, so step 4 on that website is neutrality, but in general, I was also introduced this concept of neutrality, which is everything is neutral. Every possible situation is neutral. Next slide. So basically, whatever situation we're dealing with, we decide whether or not the situation is good or bad. We decide what it is. And neutrality doesn't mean that something isn't good or bad per se, but it means that I always have the power to interpret it as such. So I could have told myself that being homeless, facing homelessness while you're pregnant, is the worst thing that can happen. And instead, it was neutral in the fact that it's just a situation that I have to deal with. And for the most part, that was how I was able to get through day by day. Next slide. And I found this online and I thought it summed up everything perfectly. Obstacles are stepping stones. The choice is ours. The choice was mine. And so, just to sum up, okay, you're gonna have to do a lot of clicking here, so.
You good?
Click,
One more time.
mhm.
Okay.
Okay, so whenever we're faced with situations like this, I've learned 5 ways to approach it. So the first thing would be to recognize how you're resisting the situation. How are you resisting what's happening? Another way to think of it is how are you suffering about what is happening? Can we, 2 more? So if you find yourself doing one of these things, ruminating, wallowing, complaining, stressing, it's like this background unhappiness, these background complaints that we have, but we don't really take action on. That's when we're resisting. The next thing to do is to accept the situation / stop resisting. One more time. For me, to accept the fact that I cannot pay my rent. One more time. And the way you accept things, or a way to help you accept a situation, is by acknowledging that it's neutral. One more time. All right, I messed these up. One more. And one more. Okay. So being homeless and pregnant, or being pregnant and facing homelessness, is a temporary situation that I can overcome. After you do that, you need to make a conscious decision about the situation. Because what happens a lot of times is we complain and we don't recognize that we have the power to change things. I spend an hour in traffic every day, hour to work, hour from work. And very soon I realized I was complaining about that. Not consciously, just, God, I hate this traffic. And once I recognized that, I said, well, what can I do? I can find a job closer to home. And so I started doing that. So it never has to be background unhappiness. We can always step back, recognize when this is happening, make a conscious decision to accept the situation as it is, or to take responsibility for changing it. So for me, in that situation, it was to make this decision that we're going to leave this apartment, even though we don't know exactly what's going to happen next. And finally, take action. In the previous one, I said take responsibility for changing it. I worded it that way because sometimes people like to have a plan of exactly what you want to do, which is me. I always have a plan for everything, which is hard, because when things don't go as planned, you don't know what to do. But sometimes you have to take action without all the steps, knowing what all the steps are. You have to have faith that what you need is going to come through. So make a plan, even if it is just to take the first step. And for me, the first step was just to give that 30 days notice that we were going to leave. So that's my story. I want to thank you all for listening.
We want to thank Moorel, and
Oh.
we want to present you this certificate of appreciation for
Oh my
coming to
gosh.
help us today.
Look at this.
Uh,
Yes,
uh,
we have about 10 minutes for
we,
questions.
we have some time for Q&A.
Okay. You had a question?
Yeah, your new apartment, what was the matter with it? You said there had to be something the matter with it, but apparently there wasn't.
No, it wasn't too bad. After being there for a while, the roach situation came up again. So for a while, it was the best place that we had ever been in. But yeah, that wasn't in the ad. But when you're searching for apartments, if you ever see dead roaches in the cabinets, it's a sign. It's a sign. Yes.
I have many questions for you,
Okay.
but feel free to take other questions in the meantime. When the Republicans were taking away was it unemployment, or they wanted to restrict it,
Yes.
during that time, how did that work out for you? I mean, did they eventually change? Has it been fixed to your liking now, or have they fixed the whole process, or they did extend it again? Is there more about that?
So the question is about the unemployment benefits and how I got extended. So at that time, the Republicans did agree to extend unemployment benefits, but I don't know, like I said, my claim itself on a personal level had expired. So when they said extend, like I got laid off in February of 2007, and this was 2009. So I guess my claim period had been extended as much as they were going to extend it. Now I didn't claim it the whole time. You were able to claim 6 months, and then you had to work for 6 months before you could claim it again. But that was as far as it was going to go.
Other question, you learned how to be resourceful, and you learned as you were going along what to do, but you were a novice at being homeless.
Yes.
So you were at the mercy of the people that are running and helping you at some level, who should be running and helping you. Did you feel that they, as you said, they would make a decision in your favor, or they wouldn't? But did you feel that they were ultimately helpful or not? Were they tainted? Were they jaded? Were they burnt out? And did that affect you at all, do you think?
So the question is about the different agencies I worked with. I was in foster care before. I'm used to dealing with social service agencies. I have always learned that you have to be your own advocate. Not everybody wants to help you. Not everybody will tell you about everything that's available for you.
How could they not do that?
That's just what it is. But I mean, I did a lot of research on my own, but I did have to, when I got in the 180-day shelter program, I had a worker who was really wanting to help me. And it didn't hurt that I had a cute little baby. You know, people would see my baby and they wanted to help me. So you always have to, I mean, when I first went to the welfare office, they gave me this list. And I called everybody on that list. And I got through it, fairly quickly. But after that, then I had to do my own research, and which is something I kind of knew how to do because, like I said, I had been in foster care. I had actually been a social worker when I was in Philadelphia. So I knew that there has to be things out here. But I mean, it was part of me knowing that there should be different options, but also I didn't know all the rules. Like when they told me my husband was excluded, I knew to double check that. But then that was me going through and doing the appeal and following that through for 7 months till it went through. Because if I hadn't got that appeal when my husband started working, it would have been too much money, because once they exclude you from the household, they still count that money as part of the household. So he would have been working, they would have counted his money as part of a two-person household, and then we would have been excluded from everything. So it was part me and part relying on the system. Yes.
Your bio says that you're working on a memoir. How's that going? And also, you were in a screenwriters, I guess, something at Disney. I assume you may want to go that route too. So how's that going?
It's interesting asking about my memoir and the screenwriting. The memoir, I work 10 hours a day right now, 4 days a week. I have 3 days off, but I also have a 7-year-old. I work on it. It'll be some time before I'm done with the memoir. The screenwriting, Hollywood is tough. I mean, I got to Disney, they chose me because of an autobiographical screenplay, so they knew part of my struggle, which, by the way, I thought that was done. I thought that struggle was over by the time I got out here, but, you know, in that 10 years, we had the writer's strike, we had the actor's strike, we lost a bunch of jobs that just never came back again. I'm not pursuing screenwriting anymore, but, you know, books, they sell enough copies, they could come in that way, but I finally let go of that. Yes.
Look back on the experience, is something you had to do to survive, or look back on it, it was an accomplishment, you overcame difficulties, or maybe you feel bitter about it, or do you feel all those things?
When I reflect on our homeless adventure, and I call it that purposefully because it could have been many other things, we had to do that. Oprah always says that life speaks to you in whispers, and then if you don't get it, it comes banging on your door. Like this, my crazy neighbor. I'm so glad I left that apartment. And making that decision to take that leap, not knowing where we were gonna go, I had to do that. It's easier to leap when you've got less to hold on to. Like, I could quit my job and work on this memoir, but I can't do that right now, you know? Taking a leap like that at this point in my life, I'm stable. I've got a good county job, I've got good benefits. Leaping like that at this point would be harder to do, but back then, I didn't want to stay in that apartment, so, and I felt grandma was looking out for me, so. That about. Yes.
Is this job that you presently have the job that you had interviewed for before, or somehow sequenced related to that interview? That was.
So this job I have with the county was not related to, I didn't start working, I didn't get hired by the county until 2013. So I was actually out of work for, because I eventually left the bank. They kept cutting our hours down to the point where it was no point to go to work anymore. And I had a baby, so I chose to stay with my child. But then when I was trying to get back into full-time employment, it took 3.5 years. And ironically, I also started working thanks to Obama. I got a job with the county because of Obamacare.
How?
Because the county administers the Medi-Cal portion of the Affordable Care Act, so they needed a lot of new workers to administer, to work for that program. And so that's how I ended up working for the county. Any other questions?
I hate to drag you through. The lowest moment and the best moment in the process?
The lowest moment would be all the stuff I didn't talk about.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, these pictures were taken while we were homeless. And none of these have my husband in them. And so a lot of what I didn't talk about is the struggles I was going through with my husband. So those were a lot of the low moments. And the high moments was every time somebody gave us more time at another place. Every time it was Friday and 3 o'clock, and we didn't know where we were going to be going the next day, and something came through. I mean, those were the good moments.
Your baby is so cute.
Thank you.
What's his name?
This is my Jules.
Jules.
This is at the Hilton in the middle. This is when we first brought him back from the hospital. I remember that moment. Like, this boy has some lungs.
Who'd you name him after?
Nobody exactly. My husband, he kept coming home with these crazy names like Obama and Hussein. And when he came home with Jules, I said, okay. I said, that'll work on a resume. He'll be able to get a job. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you for having me.